Good evening, and welcome to another episode of To Pursue the Truth. My name is Ed Monks, and I'll be your host for this evening. And tonight we're privileged to have as our guest Joe Lieberman. Joe is both a journalist and an author, and he's written a book entitled School Shootings. Looks at a number of the highly popularized and maybe not so popularized shootings that have happened throughout this country, and I'm not sure if throughout the world as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about the profile of who the shooters are and what can be done to prevent those tragic incidents. So welcome.
Well, thanks, Ed, for having me here.
It's our pleasure. Let me ask you as a preliminary question.
Sure.
How did you become interested in this topic?
It was something that I never imagined I would get into. I've been a writer for about it by now, and I looked around and there hadn't been, simply because in April '99 the Columbine shooting happened, and that drew all the attention away because, number one, it was 2 shooters instead of 1, and number 2, because of the higher body count, 13 people killed, whereas at Thurston there were 2 students killed.
Okay, so let's backfill for a moment. You said you moved here in '99. Where'd you come from, and what had you been doing before you came to Eugene?
Well, I'm originally from Boston, but I had a kind of a travel streak, and when I graduated from Boston University in fine arts, of all things, I traveled over to Europe on the cheap, backpacking, and ended up in Australia at one point. Went from there up to Japan, and I ended up being in Japan for 18 years. In Japan, I was teaching at high schools, colleges, universities, and that's where I became a journalist because I was basically a printmaker in art. And they didn't have etching presses in Japan. They do woodblock printing, but not much in the way of other types. So as a kind of alternative to the art, I became a writer and photographer.
All right. And you come to Eugene in 1999. You begin to interact with people who were affected by the Thurston incident. And there may be people watching who may not have a recollection, may have just more recently moved here. Could you give the kind of brief overview of what happened at Thurston?
Okay. As far as the interaction, again, this was totally by chance. I was teaching at LCC, and also I did some teaching at the UO in their International English Center for foreign students, as I had done in Japan. And at the UO, that was the first incident. There was a kind of a lecture discussion group on teenagers and gun violence. So I attended that, and the young woman sitting next to me, was on the Kip Kinkel defense team. And I talked to her, and I got her card, and it was a matter of some interest. But just a week later, I was sitting in the LCC cafeteria when a student came in, and she asked if she could share the table. And I said, sure. And we started talking about art, and because I had a background in art, she was doing art, but she had been told by a teacher that her art was so strange that she better see a school counselor. And I said, that's quite a reaction. Why? And she told me that they thought it was violent in nature. And I said, what school? She said, Thurston High. So things began to click into each other, and I asked if she was there during that incident, and she said she was at the front table. Now, you're asking what happened there, and there are a lot of people who, I mean, it's 11 years ago.
Right.
Now it's 2009. And basically, the extraordinary thing and what makes it different from every other school shooting in history was that Kip Kinkel was arrested for having a loaded, stolen handgun in his school locker the day before the school shooting. So that was May 20th, 1998. Now, you'd say, a loaded, stolen handgun in his locker at school, this is quite a thing. He should have been held for at least, several days and investigated. But at that time, even though there had been a school shooting, major school shootings, on the average of once every 6 weeks in the previous 2 years, and 1 month before there had been a big one, a month before that, a much bigger one, all that time leading into it, still there was no red warning flag. There was still the mindset, because this is Oregon, there had never been a school shooting here except one at the UO track field at the Autzen Stadium. many years previously. But the idea was this couldn't happen here. Besides, he's such a silly, joking kid, he can't be serious about what he's been saying about building bombs and wanting to come in and shoot kids. He had been telling people he was going to do this. So he's finally arrested with the gun. He's taken into the Springfield police station, and his father is called. His father comes down, and they do a little talking. What they talked about, I'm not sure. But the fact is, the arresting detective's wife had been Kip Kinkel's 5th grade teacher. So there was a little bit of a family connection here. Plus, Kip Kinkel's parents were both teachers. Bill Kinkel had been a teacher at Thurston High, since retired, and now at that point teaching at LCC, teaching Spanish. Kip Kinkel's mother, Faith, was at that time still teaching at Springfield High School.
Okay.
2 upstanding parents, loving home, very, very honored in the community as great teachers. If they say that it's safe to send the son home with them, we're not going to argue. They're not looking at what Kip has done, having the gun at school, but who his parents were.
All right.
He gets sent home. His father gets on the phone, desperate to try to see what help he can get. 3 hours later, Kip brings a gun of his collection downstairs, shoots his father in the back of the head.
And when you say his collection, you're referring to the father's or the son's?
No, the son had 6 guns. Kip had